Okay, hi, my name's Mark Titchner and I'm an artist. I live in London. Um, like most of you, I'm working at home now, so instead of my studio, I'm going to film this. I'm actually in my son's bedroom sitting underneath his bunk bed. So I'm going to answer a couple of questions. The first one was, how did you become an artist? So I went to art school after I finished. I did A level art, GCSE art, and then after that went to do a foundation course and decided there that I wanted to study fine art, painting, and I went to apply to Central St Martin's School in London where I did my degree, and I suppose that's the kind of beginning of how I became an artist. I would always, when I was younger, I suppose, like most people, just really like drawing, painting. My big thing that I was into when I was younger was really comics. Like I used to copy pages from comic books. I also was really interested in like the kind of record cover art. So it's kind of the kind of work that I make now has a lot of image and text next to each other. So I think that really comes from that kind of early influence of yeah, putting art and text together. So I was trying to find I've put a couple of examples. So the way that kind of writing, this is a record I had actually when I was growing up at home. So sort of image and text together, and again thinking about like comic books. So I think to me, when I was growing up, this was probably the kind of stuff that I thought was art. Like I hadn't really been to art galleries and stuff as such. So, the kind of art that I wanted to make or was interested in was the kind of art that anyone might come across, like, on in a town centre or in a high street or something, rather than something that you had to go to a museum to see. And I still really like that idea. So a lot of projects I do are based on trying to find spaces to like for people to see art where they wouldn't normally. So I guess the bit about becoming an artist in education is kind of one thing. It's like when you finish at art school, that's kind of the beginning rather than the end. So I think for some people, that can be a bit of a shock. So after I finished at St Martin's, so I was, I don't know, 22 or something. That was kind of the easy bit in a way. That was the end of my education, and then after that, I had to try and, I guess, find a way of being an artist and supporting myself. And it probably took me probably 8 or 9 years after finishing art school, to, I guess, to sort of be what you might call like a professional kind of full-time artist. So in that time in between, I did, just worked jobs and sort of tried to make art in the evening. And one thing that was really important around that time as well, which really helped, was, I guess, meeting other artists who lived in lived in London that I met at art school or from other colleges, and starting to kind of self-organize exhibitions and just work with what we had available. So a lot of the early exhibitions that I was involved with were with friends, and they were in like places like people's houses. Like we did exhibitions in off flat with kind of artwork in the in the bathroom or in the kitchen. It was quite good fun, and there was a whole kind of scene of that stuff happening around the time. I think that was it's a really important thing to be able to organise your own projects and exhibitions, and do them in a way that you know is possible for you. It doesn't have to always be something really fancy or big. It's important to connect with those people around you and build something for yourselves. Okay, so the next question is, why did you want to become an artist? Um, I don't really know the answer to that, to be honest. I think it just came out of the initial enjoyment of drawing, and yeah, just a kind of headspace of that really. Um, I I think the kind of art that I make now, I probably didn't really have any idea when I was first starting to get interested in art that I'd be making the kind of art that I do now. Like I definitely was, really interested in kind of painting and drawing and a particular sort of I guess oil painting type tradition, which I don't really work with at all now. Though I work in a different way. I work with the computer a lot of the time, but I am still kind of the core of things is still based on drawing and the sort of joy of sort of starting with a blank page or a blank computer screen and ending up with something that you didn't kind of expect at the end of it. So the kind of discovery in that, I, I think the kind of work that I do now, which is more about, is tied into something, we call kind of conceptual art. I certainly didn't know anything about that, but I always liked thinking about, how the world was or why it was a certain kind of way, and being able to bring that kind of way of thinking about the world into making art and making images is something that I think when those things came together, like when I was at art school, I sort of came across, I guess, more contemporary art. Like it seemed to fit well together, and also I really think reading's always been really important to me. And again, when I made the decision quite late into sort of my career, well not career, into my time being an artist, to work mainly with words and text, it was a way of kind of combining that the importance that reading has to me in making the art that I do every day. But I guess the short answer really is I wanted to be an artist because I enjoyed doing it. I think I'm been very lucky to be able to touch wood, to be able to be an artist for most of my profession, most of my kind of adult life, interspersed with doing all kinds of jobs and other bits and pieces over the years. But I've been lucky enough to be able to do that most of the time. And I think that's probably the core of it, is just the fact that I really enjoyed it. So the next question was, what is your chosen art form? So my practice as an artist is quite diverse, I suppose. I work with large scale digital print, things, mural, wall painting, sculpture installations, sound, video, even some performance based pieces. So that's it's quite all over the place. It's quite varied, but the thing that connects those various aspects of what I do is that most of those different ways of working would have an element of language, text, words within it. So that's kind of shared across those things, and that can take different kinds of forms. I mean, sometimes the texts are sort of quite bold and apparent, like this. This is an old work from 2004, which was made to go on the platforms at a railway station. And then other times the text could kind of be hidden. So like in this piece, the words are set into a kind of a code. So become like an abstract pattern rather than being something that's legible. So I like to operate between the kind of language being very clear and I guess being hidden or coded. It's a bit like the language is like a different tone of voice. Like sometimes it can be someone, very clearly kind of demonstrably kind of shouting at you, and other times it's more like, I don't know, the voice of a child or a friend, something quite gentle. The other thing that's quite important to me is where the work goes. So probably for the first 10 years of being an artist, the work that I was making was going into museums and gallery spaces and traditional places that artists would work in. And then at a certain point, I got interested in trying to find spaces where you wouldn't necessarily find artwork. So looking at particularly kind of spaces in urban settings, and I live in London, so I guess that was a big influence, but thinking about places like billboards, poster sites, how the work could exist in places like stations and libraries. So it's much more to do with something which was part of the fabric of everyday life, as opposed to something that you maybe went out to look for. So it's something you might come across. A lot of the work that I've been doing recently has been cited. I've been working a lot with issues around mental health. So quite a lot of the recent work has been in situations relating to that. So I've been making site-specific works in closed psychiatric units or on the kind of borders of hospitals. So it's the meaning of the work is really tied to where it is. And that's kind of critical. So the next question was, do you sell your work? This is slightly more complicated question than it might seem to be. I mean, yes, I do sell my work, and I have sold my work. Obviously, artists have to find strategies for surviving. I don't tend to make too much work, which I guess the average person could put in their house, or even the average art collector could put in their house, because I'm working quite large scale these days, so I tend to work in a slightly different way now. So a lot of I have a teaching job, which I do, which contributes to being able to sort of survive as an artist. I teach at an art school, and I guess I do quite a lot of public commission work, so works which may have a kind of fee attached to them, as opposed to it being like a sale. So that might be like a kind of project which lasts for a few years, and you get paid kind of during that time in kind of bits and pieces. So I mean, I guess the long and the short of it, yes, is like I do have sold my work. I've worked with commercial art galleries who've sold my work over the years. And I guess in the way that galleries do. So it would be to through gallery shows or through art fairs or those kind of things. So it's slightly different now. I don't really sell work in that sort of way. So I think artists have to be quite flexible, really, in their approach to kind of surviving as artists. It's tricky. You might sell a work, and you might not sell another work for 2 years, so or 5 years or 10 years or never. It's one sale doesn't necessarily lead to another. So it's kind of about not relying on one thing and trying to do lots of different things, really. Be open to kind of opportunities and thinking about what you can do rather than what you can't do, because I think it can feel it's pretty tough, I think, to survive as an artist. So the final question was, who is your favourite artist? I'd say I'd probably have had lots of favourite artists throughout my life. When I was younger, like first getting interested in art, I was really interested in the kind of tradition of kind of British kind of visionary painting. So people like William Blake, Samuel Palmer, and a bit later Stanley Spencer, and I guess those are artists that were very much tied to where they worked. The meaning of kind of what they were doing was very much about the space they lived in. Because I work with like language. There are a whole load of artists that do that, which have been really influential to me. People like Barbara Kruger and Jenny Holzer, Lawrence Wiener, Bruce Nauman, And then obviously there are kind of like timeless kind of artists, like kind of Caravaggio or Rembrandt. Lots of amazing artists. And I guess the thing is, you can always find something when you look at good art. And I think it's interesting to kind of maybe look at things you don't really kind of, I don't know, look at all the time. Take something from that, be able to kind of see that art that's quite different from yours has something to offer. That, yeah, it's like you want to listen to different music or eat different food depending on how you feel. I think in terms of the artists I think about the most when I'm working, it's probably Bruce Nauman, because there's a kind of real purity and concise kind of nature to his work. It's very, very direct and very tough and very powerful. And I think that that's, I mean, I can't, my brain is not wired in the same way as his necessarily, but I don't have that kind of clarity of thought that he is able to project in his work. So when I see that, I see that as always something to kind of aspire to, really, to think in that kind of, to think what is the best way to express this idea, what's the simplest kind of terms, how can I make this closest to kind of life. It's like taking away anything that doesn't need to be there. I think quite often in stuff that I do, maybe it is quite a lot, it could be taken away. And I think that might sound weird, because sometimes the work's just kind of, words on a page almost. But I think, as soon as it's like things get complicated very quickly. If you have like some words, well, what are the words? How are you going to write them down? What do they look like? What size are they? What colour are they? What does the background look like? How does it relate to the text? Where are the images coming from that are in the background? And then for me, it's like, well, where does it go? If it goes on a particular street, how is it different if it goes on onto a one in a different town? How does the meaning of the artwork change? So I think in that case it gets very quickly. So I think thinking about simplicity is very useful.